Welcome back, everybody, to Toronto Today here on The Parlay. I'm your host, Luca Rosano, alongside my co-host, Michael Singh, and we got another jam-packed edition of this show. Before we get into it, let's recap our best bet picks. And I'm telling you, Mike, I couldn't believe it. When I saw the Clippers were down by 30 plus points, I'm like, okay, there you go. I'm going to lose another best bet. And then they came back to not only cover, but won the game outright. It was the second largest comeback in NBA history. They were down by 35 and they got the lead with a Luca 4-point play. What were they thinking fouling him on that three? It was the most idiotic thing I had ever seen, most bizarre ending to a game I had ever seen. And if you're a Wizards fan, you're crying yourself all day long today because how on earth did you blow that? I was just happy enough to cover the spread, but when I saw they won by one, I couldn't believe it. Imagine if you had the guts to put them live to win the game when they were down 35 points. You would be pretty wealthy today.
Yeah, man, like that was me yesterday, but I was the Wizards with my bet. When who did I bet on yesterday or the day before that? I think it was
the Bulls game, I think. Yeah.
I think it was the Bulls, yeah. And man, I understand what it's like to be on the other end of that game. I saw that. I'm like, there's no way Luca must be so happy right now that comeback actually transpired. And hey, credit for you, man. You called it. Like after the first half, I'm like, okay, there's no chance. Like it's Luca's unfortunately going to be in the losing column, but somehow, some way, the NBA is a funny league, and it worked out in your favor last night. So credit to you, man.
Yeah, the Clippers have done that a couple times this season. They are the comeback kings. They did that in a game against Philly. They came back and won, and they were down by 20 plus points, and then they do it again here against the Wizards on the road, both times on the road. So this team they've been fun to watch despite missing Kawhi and Paul George. All right, let's talk about the Raptors. This team, you never know what you're going to get with them, honestly. After looking very bad on Sunday and losing to a Blazers team they should not have lost against, they look very good against the Hornets. And I know you were worried about this one right before tip-off because unexpectedly, Fred VanVleet and Barnes ruled out of the game. They did not play. And everybody was thinking to themselves, okay, this is going to be an L. The Hornets are a good team. They're going to blow out the Raptors. The Raptors won't have enough offensive punch to keep up with them. But that was not the case. It was the other way around. The Raptors offense actually looked good in this one. Siakam playing the point looked great. And the Raptors defense limited a pretty good Hornets offense that cannot hit a three to save their life. So the Raptors did cover the number. Now, I didn't see what the line had dropped to right before tip-off. I'm not sure if you saw, but I'm assuming the Hornets were a favorite right before tip-off, especially after the news of VanVleet and Barnes broke. So if you bet the Raptors despite those guys being out, yeah, good job, because this team, they came away with a nice performance. OG stepped up, and then Gary Trent Jr., we were talking about his player prop yesterday. I think we both went over with that. Yeah, we love to see him get back on track. He had 32 points on 5 3-pointers made. And Mike, honestly, I'm starting to see a pattern. When Gary Trent Jr. has a very good game, the Raptors are next to impossible to beat. This is a sound team, a very good team when he gets his offense going, and they do put up a ton of points. He's like that, that wild card element because Siakam and OG and VanVleet, one of those three will get theirs. Can Gary be that other guy who chimes in and has himself a nice night? And we saw that. He had a great game, and it really fueled this team. And then, so you look at this team now. I mean, they are in the thick of things in the East, and they don't look now, but they could make a bit of a run here. We talk about how important these next 2 weeks are. That was a great way for them to start it off with a nice win against a pretty good Hornets team.
Statement game, man. Absolute statement game after their performance on Sunday. And, after that win last night, the 4 games separate the 6 teams between 7th and 12th in the Eastern Conference. So that's Charlotte, Boston, Toronto, Washington, New York, and Atlanta. And with their win over the Hornets, the Raptors improved to 8-3 versus those teams in that group. And they already own 2 of the tiebreakers versus Washington and the Knicks. So that's great if you're looking for the Raptors to potentially make the playoffs here, even potentially as one of those top 8 seeds. if they can hang on there and get the advantage in the play-in round, that'll bode well for their chances moving forward. And again, as we talk about quite constantly on this show, it's another reason for Masai to go out and add to this Raptors team. You mentioned Gary Trent Jr. there. Yeah, I think we touched on that a bit yesterday with how important he is to this team. He's sort of that X factor at times, and he really stepped up with Fred VanVleet out. He hit his player prop in the first half. He had the green light, the automatic green light, and it was better if you bet Gary Trent Jr.'s player prop that Freddie was out, because there's not many people on the Raptors that can kind of get their shot anywhere on the court like Gary Trent Jr. can. Another one, of course, is Fred VanVleet, but with him out of the game, Gary Trent kind of takes over in that spot. 5 3-pointers made. That's money, especially when he's knocking down some outrageous contested shots. I mean, that's when Gary Trent Jr. is at his best, when he isn't afraid to take those shots. There was a play, I think, towards the end of the third quarter when he had an isolation on himself. He switched off to Plumlee, and he had that isolation at the top of the key. He stepped back and drew a foul, and he shot 3 points, and actually a technical foul. He shot 4 free throws in a row and knocked them all down. So Gary Trent Jr. is very important to this team if he can find his role. But speaking of finding their role on this team, how about the Raptors bench last night? Finally coming alive, and of course they had to with both Scotty Barnes and Freddie out of the game. Malachi Flynn, I thought he played really well in his stint. He played the entire second quarter, did a lot of really good things, knocked down a corner 3. And then, of course, Delano Banton, he kind of set the pace right from the jump for that bench. He was the first guy off the bench, and that was coming off a pretty terrific G League performance the night prior. So he's gaining a lot of confidence. He saw him taking probably a lot more shots than he did in the past, and because I think that's where his confidence level is. And then someone like a Chris Boucher, I want to shout out, because as I've touched on in the past, like, Chris Boucher is so polarizing with the way that he plays. Sometimes he can make some very questionable decisions, but last night he really stayed in his role despite the fact that they had those 2 absences. He only took 6 field goal attempts. He was 3 of 6 from the floor, knocked down 2 3-pointers, and really played within his role, which is, hustling on the glass, making life difficult for the opposition, and battling inside. And he really stuck within that. He didn't try to do too much. There was a play where Boucher, I think, came up with a defensive rebound, dribbled the ball up the court, and I'm thinking to myself, oh no, he's going to do something stupid. But what he does is he drew the defender in, faked a 3, and just handed it off to, I think it was Gary Trent Jr. beside him, and Gary Trent Jr. knocks down a 3. Just little plays like that I feel like the Raptors as a whole are sort of finding their mesh, their rhythm right now. So it's a good time to be a Raptors fan. We'll see if they can continue that momentum tonight.
Yeah, that was perfectly said. Even Champagny wasn't in this one. He got ejected in the first quarter. So the Raptors were very short-handed. And we see when they have some sort of productivity from their bench, how good they can be. And Raptors fans were watching this game like, where was this all season with Malachi Flynn playing well and even Delano Banton? And I couldn't really understand Banton's situation, because if you look at his season overall, he's had a really sound season for the Raptors. He's that energizer. He comes into the game, he alleviates some of that playmaking ability, that workload that Fred VanVleet has had to deal with. And he can make some nice plays out there when he's in the open court. And not to mention, when he's hitting his shot, that just adds another layer to his game. And I think it does help that he's getting those extra reps in between games with the 905. As you mentioned, he tore it up the night before, and that obviously translated into a really nice game against the Hornets. And you need that sometimes. You got to get your confidence back up. You got to get your momentum flowing. And there's no better way of doing it by dominating 905 games. And Malachi Flynn is very interesting. I saw a joke on Twitter that the Raptors playing Malachi Flynn and sitting out Fred VanVleet unexpectedly was to increase Malachi Flynn's trade value. I'm curious to see what they're going to do with him. He's obviously got some promise to his game. Obviously, you got his dad acting like LeVar Ball off the court, talking a great deal. But I want to see if the Raptors truly believe in this kid and will give him more opportunities down the stretch, or if they are going to use him as sort of a trade bait to send a guy like Dragic somewhere else, because that is going to lead me to my next thing that I wanted to talk about, and that is the ongoing topic and conversation we've had of who could the Raptors potentially go out and get. So I think it's safe to say, just based on reports and what we've read, the Raptors are looking to be buyers. They're looking to add to this core and invest in them. But what they're not willing to do is give up one of their core pieces, which makes sense. So for all those OG trade rumors that you've seen, even Siakam or Gary Trent Jr., I'd be surprised if that happens at this point. So how can they add to this group by giving up some of those other players? Well, you're going to have Dragic at your disposal. Obviously, that's going to be tough to move. But you got some interesting other chips that you could potentially put in a deal, like a Malachi Flynn, like a future first round pick. So I'm really curious to see how the Raptors handle this, but I do expect them to keep Malachi or Banton, because I really feel that, you know, one of those guys can truly emerge as the backup facilitator to this team. Me personally, I see a lot more in Banton. I like his game a tad bit more because he does have that size, which is rare to find at the point guard position. I mean, anytime you got a guy who's 6'7", 6'8", moving the way he does, you got to keep that. So maybe the Raptors can leverage Malachi with a Dragic, with a pick, and get something back in return. What do they need? We've talked about it so many times. Another big, another shooter who can stretch the floor, and some playmaking help for Fred VanVleet. But if Banton can prove to be that guy from off the bench, that would solve that. So yeah, it's a very interesting time to be a Raptors fan. And what's reassuring though, Mike, is for as inconsistent as they've beaten those teams that you've mentioned, the teams that are around them, the Hornets of the world, the Knicks of the world, the Celtics of the world, the Wizards of the world. And I would be confident against any one of those teams, especially if the Raptors bench could get it going. You add VanVleet and Barnes back into the lineup. This is actually a pretty solid team. And it would not surprise me if Masai does whatever it takes to invest in this team, because this is it. Like, this is the Raptors team that we got to ride with. There's not going to be any surprise superstar, I don't think, that Masai is going to try to go get. This is the unit that either makes or breaks, you know, what this team's all about.
Yeah, I don't know if this team right now, as constructed, is. I mean, I do know it's not a contending team in terms of this isn't a team that can necessarily go out and win you an NBA championship right now. I still think they need to add at least a couple pieces to make this a really strong group that can compete with the Milwaukee Bucks, with the you know, a healthy Brooklyn Nets team just in the Eastern Conference, and of course tonight the Chicago Bulls. I love how you gave Brandon his credit. I mean, this is a guy from where he's from Rexdale, right? Yeah. He's a local Toronto kid, and it's not very often you kind of see stories like that come through the Raptors. And what a gem he was in the second round here, I think it was pick 46, which is absolutely fantastic. So if he can kind of continue this sort of rise here, and I do see a lot of value in him because of, as you mentioned there, Luca, bang on his size. His size is so key. And yeah, if I had to pick one of the two, it is Malachi that probably is more expendable than Delano. And there are rumors out there that, you know, Masai is willing to add Malachi into any sort of deal to kind of get it done. I wonder what sort of value that can bring back. I wonder what his value is kind of on the open market, because whenever this guy goes to the G League, like, he absolutely tears it up, like MVP numbers. I remember speaking to somebody who played for the 905 last year, and they were saying the same thing. Like, this guy is so good, and watching him play, he has so much talent, but he hasn't been able to figure it out in the NBA as yet. Of course, he hasn't been given like a crazy amount of time. If you think back towards last season, Malachi was tearing it up at the end of the year with the Raptors. He wasn't able to kind of continue that momentum moving forward into this season because, you know, there's more competition there at the point guard spot with the way that Freddie is playing and the way that Nick Nurse is riding his starters. But Malachi is a baller. So I wonder if it's the right time to sort of capitalize on that value. We'll see. I mean, I guess we'll see how aggressive Masai will be at the deadline. But as you mentioned, this is the team that I expect the Raptors to be riding with this season at least. And hey, as we touched on in the past, it's a team that I wouldn't want to face if I was any other team in the Eastern Conference, just because they have that X factor on defense. And we've seen in the past how the Old Testament holds true, that defense wins championships, and this Raptors team is built out from the back.
Yeah, they're a few pieces away, I think, from being really good. A team that you definitely don't want to see. So we'll see if they do get that depth closer to the trade deadline and further invest in this core that has been playing well lately. All right, let's talk about the Raptors' next matchup quickly here. They're going to be going up against DeMar DeRozan, a familiar face. This game's going to be in Chicago. DeRozan, he's coming off a monster 41-point performance against the Magic. Will he rip the Raptors here? We're not sure what the player prop is just yet. Not sure if it's out, but we're expecting it to be definitely over 20. So are you expecting a big night from DeRozan? Because I am.
Yeah, I think anytime he sort of plays the Raptors, he finds a way to kind of elevate his game. We can talk about that trade into, I mean, I still think he takes it personally. And, you know, he's done several interviews since saying, you know, it's in the past and whatnot, but it's still definitely circled on his calendar. And the season that he's having right now, I mean, he's averaging 26.3 points per game this season, which is the second most in his career aside from that 2016-2017 Raptors team, where he was absolutely fantastic for them. But he has a lot more support on this team, in my opinion. Like the way that Zach LaVine has been playing this season, he's now back in the lineup. He returned last night. I don't know if they'll play him on a back-to-back. It sounds like they will. But or was it the night before? It might have been the night before that the Bulls played. Before. Okay, so I do expect LaVine to kind of be in the lineup tonight. And DeRozan's also coming off that monster 41-point performance versus the Magic on 15 of 21 shooting. So his confidence level is sky high. And if you guys want to take a wild gamble here when we're talking about DeMar DeRozan a little bit, plus 2,500 to win the MVP right now. And hey, I don't know if they'll ever give it to a player like DeRozan unless he does something absolutely jaw-dropping, just because he isn't that marquee kind of name. He's not the James Hardens. He's not the LeBron James. I mean, they gave it to Jokic last year, but that's because Jokic had a ridiculous season. And honestly, Jokic is having another ridiculous season. I think right now he's actually one of the favorites to win the award. So I don't know if that's quite the gamble you want to take. Most improved, he's plus 6,000. Again, I'm not sure if that's quite the gamble you want to take, but what I will take is the over on DeMar DeRozan points tonight, because I think he's just going to go off against the Raptors, Luca.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I don't think he cares about these individual awards. He's kind of in the middle here because he's not as big or as good as those marquee names like a Jokic, like a Giannis, who's filling up the stat sheet. And Steph obviously fell off. Durant's injured. So he could be a long shot for MVP, especially if he continues to play the way that he's been playing. During that stretch where he hit back-to-back three-point buzzer beaters, he was damn well looking like an MVP. But I think you bring up a good point about just his name and some of the other marquee players that are out there. I think he falls short of that. And then most improved player, I wouldn't put him in that category because DeRozan has typically done this throughout his career. You talk about, his days with the Raptors. He's always been that point getter, and he's been a team's best player before. He was the Raptors' best player for a couple of those seasons when he was with the team and they made those deep playoff runs, unfortunately falling to LeBron. So, yeah, in terms of the type of season DeRozan's having, I don't think he cares about any of that. He just cares about winning. And this is the season that I want to see him have that postseason success that he was unable to have with the Raptors. And he does have a very good team around him. He has no excuses now. He's got the team. He's got the teammates. Granted, they got to be healthy. But this Bulls team, from top to bottom, when they're all out there together, this is a tough team to beat. And they've beaten the Nets a couple times. I know they got humbled on national television the last time they met. But this is a team that's still expected to be up there and battling in the playoffs for a chance to get to an NBA Finals. I do think they're no flash in the pan. This is a team that is legit, and it's going to take some marquee performances by DeRozan in the playoffs, helping this team getting to that next step. And this Bulls team, they're very interesting because outside of DeRozan, LaVine's very raw, Lonzo's very raw, even Vucevic. So, he's got a couple of first round playoff appearances, but other than that, there's not a whole ton of playoff experience here. So DeRozan can be that guy that is the leader, is the main guy as he tries to lead this Bulls team into uncharted territory. So I'm excited to see what the Bulls do in the playoffs. But in terms of tonight, smash that over, whatever it is. I think DeRozan has a big game. He always does against his former team. And this is one instance where it's always circled on his calendar just because of how it ended. It's a bitter taste in his mouth. I guarantee it still is. He can say that it's not. But when you are traded away from a team like that you put everything into unexpectedly, you better believe it's always going to be on your mind, and you're always going to want to show them up every time you play them. So that's why I love DeRozan's player prop bet tonight. I think he's going to explode, and he could single-handedly be the reason why the Bulls do beat the Raptors again, just like the first time these two teams met. And the first time, I don't have his stats in front of me, but he absolutely delivered against the Raptors. I remember that game in the fourth quarter. It was relatively close, and DeRozan took over. So I can see something similar happening tonight.
I wouldn't be surprised at all. Toronto right now is right in their last 5 games against Chicago as well. For circling back to the actual game as a whole, they're 4-point dogs heading into this one, but in their last 5 against Chicago, they're 1-4 straight up, 1-5 against the spread in their last 6 games against Chicago. And when they're playing as the underdog, they're 3-8 in their last 11. So not great numbers for the Raptors. When you look at the Bulls, on the other hand, they're 23-7 as the favorite this season, 10-2 straight up in their last 12 games at home. They have struggled of late in their last 8, but that's because they've been missing so many players. It was namely just DeMar DeRozan that was kind of in the lineup. So this will be the first time in quite some time that they're going to have both DeRozan, LaVine, and Vooch all in the lineup. Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso are still going to be missing, but I'm expecting, probably a strong Bulls performance tonight. And when you consider that Fred VanVleet's still questionable, same with Scotty Barnes, we don't really know exactly what type of lineup the Raptors are going to be throwing out. And I don't know if they can really replicate what they did last night on a back-to-back when they're traveling now on the road after, a game at home last night. So I'm honestly, I'm kind of swayed towards covering that Bulls. So Bulls by 4 is what I'm leaning towards.
I think so too. I don't think the Raptors being shorthanded in this spot will go as well as it did last night. This is a very different Bulls team, much better than the Hornets. And you just mentioned it. When they have DeRozan, Vooch, and LaVine, they're tough to beat. The numbers when those 3 guys are playing together, off the charts. So that's going to be big for the Raptors to overcome, especially if VanVleet and or Barnes misses this game as well. So we'll see what happens there, but I do like Bulls -4. I feel like I'm betting against the Raptors every single game at this point. I gotta chill with that. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there, but I will be going against the Raptors again in terms of the spread. All right, let's get into Leafs Ducks. The Leafs are -1.5 on the puck line, -286 on the money line. The over-under for this game is 6. Let's make our quick picks for this one. Do you think the Leafs keep it going here?
Yeah, I think so. Just because the Ducks are really banged up right now, and straight up in their last 7 games against Toronto, the Ducks are just 1-6, and Anaheim, they're 1-4 straight up in the last 5 games on the road. And like I said, they're just really banged up right now. While Toronto, on the other hand, they're finally looking like they're, for the most part, a healthier side. I know they're going to be shuffling some things around by playing Nylander, Marner, and Matthews all on separate lines tonight, something we haven't really seen under Sheldon Keefe in the past, and maybe that really ignites their offense once again. Especially when, Leafs are heading into this one as the betting favorite. 25-9-1 as the betting favorite this season. They typically take care of business, especially when they're playing at Scotiabank Arena. 5-1 straight up in their last 6 games at Scotiabank Arena. So I expect the Leafs to kind of continue this run and take care of business here against Anaheim. So I would actually be comfortable taking them on the puck line at -115.
Yeah, I agree with you. I like the Leafs here too. I think they do get it done. They're 7-3 in their last 10 against Anaheim. Jack Campbell is going tonight, so he's going to be well rested. He had the last game off. I expect him to be unbelievable between the pipes. Yeah, I think this is going to be one-sided. I really do. I would lay on the puck line, and I think it goes over 6 goals. I can see the Leafs scoring 4 or 5 tonight. I really can. They have been really good as a betting favorite this season, 25-9-1. So they, for the most part, outside of them blowing leads, they've been a pretty safe bet when they have been an overwhelming favorite against these teams. And as you said, the Ducks 1-6 in their last 7 against Toronto, 1-4 straight up in their last 5 road games. Nothing's really suggesting you to take the Ducks here. If you're feeling lucky, maybe take them +1.5 on the puck line, hoping that this is a close game and the Leafs, if they do win, only win by 1. But I don't see that happening. I would lay Leafs puck line and over goals. Those would be my picks for tonight.
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you. I think the Ducks overall, like, they had a really good start to the year. Like a really, really good start to the year. They really surprised a lot of teams, but that has cooled down rapidly. And I think they're more so that type of team that they are now, as opposed to what they were showing earlier in the year. And I think the Leafs will absolutely take advantage tonight. That's just my hunch, but the Leafs have proved us wrong in the past, so we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, we've seen that sometimes this season. You can never trust this team definitively. All right, let's talk about Felix. Man, I said yesterday, if he beat Medvedev, we would talk about him to begin the show. It almost happened. I couldn't believe it. I did watch the highlights. I did not watch the entire match, which did begin at 3:30 a.m. Eastern. But I couldn't believe it. He was right there, and he almost pulled this one off. He was up 2 sets, and then Medvedev, credit him, comes all the way back. And I think that is the most difficult thing to do in sports. When you are down 2 sets in a long, grueling tennis match, and you come all the way back to win. I play tennis, so I kind of understand it at the very, very, very basic level. You have to be mentally sharp to be able to battle all the way back. And that just says how good Medvedev is and why he has established himself as one of the best tennis players in the world right now. Felix had it. He played really sound, really well. If he goes back, he probably doesn't change much other than the fact that he did let Medvedev back into it. And once it was 2-2 going into that 5th set, advantage Medvedev as he took care of business. And yeah, it just sucks to see it happen like that. It was the complete reverse of what happened with Shapo. Shapo was the one who came all the way back, but just fell short. Yeah. This was about Felix having it, but then having it taken away from him.
This feels like it's that next step in Canadian tennis, right? We would think about Shapo. He took Nadal to 5 sets. Obviously, he really upset Zverev in straight sets. And then you think about Felix, really, I didn't give him a chance. We didn't really give him a chance. I don't think many people out there really gave Felix a chance against Medvedev, who historically has just dominated Felix in the past. But this was seriously that next step. Felix looked like a legitimate star-studded talent out there, and one of the guys who could really hang with tennis best. Unfortunately, of course, as you mentioned, he mentally perhaps it just let Medvedev back into this one, but you got to give credit to Medvedev there, because as you mentioned, it's the world's best that can kind of pull something like that off. But Felix was right there the entire match. I'm kind of heartbroken here that he wasn't able to pull this off. I know that he is as well, but as I said, I think this is just a stepping stone to what should be a very special season for Canadian tennis as a whole. So I know it's not what we really wanted to be talking about today, but at least we can, like Shapo, he went out in sort of a positive light. This was a hell of a performance from the young Canadian, and I think the future's bright for tennis in Canada.
Yeah, that's a great way to spin it. I think at the start of the Australian Open, if you had said Shapo and Felix would make it to the quarters and both be a set away from advancing to the semis, and while doing that, beating some pretty big names, top names in tennis right now, you would take that. This is going to do tremendously well for their career, and they're both relatively young. They got so many better days ahead of them. And yeah, I think this could be that stepping stone that you just mentioned that does take them over that hump. And we could see both of these players take that next step at the next Open or major. So this was very, very... it was disappointing because we were so close, but this was inspiring, reassuring to see that the future of Canadian tennis is bright with Shapo and Felix leading the way on the men's side. So great job, boys. Almost got it done. Hopefully better luck next time, and they can one-up themselves and make it to a semifinal, if not a final. All right. Let's get to our best bet now for this Wednesday night. What do you got for us, Mike?
Yeah, coming off a win last night, I'm gonna try and get back to 500. And as I've done in the past, I'm gonna pull an audible. I was gonna go for the Hornets Pacers game tonight, but something I haven't done quite often is bet on hockey. And the way that we were kind of talking about that Leafs game, I convinced myself I like that bet. So I'm going to take the Leafs tonight on the puck line at -1.5 to hopefully get me back to 500. Sorry, that's -115 are the odds there if they get the puck line and win by 2. So nice. I'm taking the Leafs tonight.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked the hockey game. I feel like we've been avoiding the NHL altogether, and we've just been doing NBA, NFL. That's my bad. Well, I'm going back to what's been working for me. It almost didn't work last night, but it did at the end. I'm going back to the association. Give me the Grizzlies on the road against the Spurs -4. This seems like a trap. I'm actually surprised the spread is this low. So I hope I'm not proven right in that sense. The Spurs are playing on the second night of a back-to-back, but I guess Vegas is giving them their respect. They absolutely dismantled, who was it? The Rockets. They blew them out. They played such an amazing game. I couldn't believe that this was a Spurs team that had been sputtering, playing that well, but they're going to be going up against a different animal, no pun intended, with the Grizzlies. And the Grizzlies have been a safe bet in their last couple of games. They have covered the spread in 7 of their last 10, whereas San Antonio has only covered the spread in 3 of their last 10. So I will go with the Grizzlies. I think this is like the second time I'm taking them on the show. I'm riding with John Moran and company to get it done on the road against the Spurs. Spurs, though, whenever they're at home, they're a tough team to beat, but I think the Grizzlies get it done. I'll lay the 4.
And I'll add to that a little bit. I think the Grizzlies are 5-0 in their last 5 games against San Antonio. So that bodes even better in your favor. So let's see if the Grizz can pull it off, and you can kind of keep this hot streak going, Luca.
Again, it seems too good to be true. I'm hoping there's no swerve here, classic betting swerve. So we'll see, and hopefully we can talk about some winners on tomorrow's show. That is going to conclude today's Toronto Today. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. You can follow us all over social media at The Parlay. You can get this podcast wherever you get your favorite podcast. And Mike and I will be back tomorrow talking Toronto sports and more. Take care, everyone.